The Braves are less than 3 weeks away from reporting to spring training, and we are in full preview mode here on BPTV. On this episode, we're going to talk about the Atlanta bullpen. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend. All of those things help the show grow and the channel, as a matter of fact, as well. Grant McCauley alongside Chris Willis, as always, and we all know the importance of a strong group of relievers. And Chris, I think the Braves took that to heart as they began their winter shopping in 2023 in preparation for this 2024 season.
No doubt. Everybody was focused on the rotation, but they spent the early part of the offseason fortifying that bullpen and shoring it up. So it should be a good group. It was been pretty good group the last two seasons, but I think this group has a chance to be the best yet.
Yeah, as we'll talk about, there are going to be highs and lows. There's going to be injuries, attrition, the changing of the guard, if you will, sometimes a little bit quicker than you might expect, because it wasn't too long ago we were talking about the night shift, and the bullpen was a huge reason why the Braves won the World Series. Well, now we're talking about the bullpen throughout the course of that marathon that is the regular season. And I think for all 30 teams, results may vary. But let's dive in here. Let's break down this group, because I think this, Chris, is a bullpen that's full of veterans, full of guys who have been there before from the right side and from the left side, which is particularly important. And many of these guys have strong track records or recent success in a Braves uniform. And two arms I want to start with that re-signed. We talk about that winter shopping. Both of these guys, both right-handers, Joe Jimenez and Pierce Johnson, a couple of trades made by Alex Anthopoulos over the last year. Obviously, he liked what he saw to bring each of these guys back on multi-year deals rather than let them walk and try to fill their shoes through some other route, some other trade, some other free agent. He'd like to have Joe Jimenez back, and he got him. 29 years old is Joe. He got 3 years and $26 million to return to Atlanta. Started off slowly with an offseason back surgery that kind of in spring training, I think, slowed him down. But by the time he got to the second half, he'd really come into his own. Finished the year with a 3.04 ERA in 59 games, nearly 12 strikeouts per nine for Jimenez. Johnson, meanwhile, he'll turn 33 years old in May, was excellent after coming over from Colorado. He'd also been good with the Padres prior in his career. He gets a 2-year, $14.25 million contract to re-up with the Braves. 0.66 ERA in 24 innings after coming over at the trade deadline. Doubled his ground ball percentage, Chris, which I thought was pretty notable, and so did Pierce Johnson for that matter. And oh, by the way, he also fanned 12 batters per nine with his new team. So this is a pretty nice duo of righties to have back in the fold if you're the Braves.
Oh, no doubt about it. Joe Jimenez, like you said, a little bit of a slow start, but you could see as the season bore on that the velocity started to tick back up and just was really, really effective down the stretch. And then Pierce Johnson was a huge addition at the trade deadline, pitched really well in the postseason too. You mentioned the ground ball rate. I mean, those are two solid arms, two veteran arms. They can pitch in middle relief. They can pitch in a higher leverage late inning role as well. Just a lot of versatility. But I thought it was pretty big. I was kind of expecting maybe they brought one of those guys back. The fact that they were able to go get both of them and keep them in Atlanta, I thought that was huge.
Yeah, definitely a big deal. And I think it shows, with the Braves and the payroll that has been rising year over year, and now they're in the luxury tax thresholds we've talked about here on the show before, the fact that they are willing to dole out that money on this bullpen to make sure that they have continuity and consistency and arms they can count on, that was a big theme this winter. And another guy who falls under that is Reynaldo Lopez. You can add him into this mix of new Braves for 2024. Pierce Johnson's been here for a minute. Joe Jimenez maybe a minute longer than that, but Reynaldo Lopez, I think the expectations for him are pretty high, considering that he is an arm that could do a couple of different things for the Braves, whether it's starting or relieving, but relief was really where his career has taken off after being traded away by the Washington Nationals quite a while ago. 3.27 ERA in 68 appearances, a career best 11.3 strikeouts per nine in 2023, but he ended up pitching for three clubs. He then signed a 3-year, $26 million deal with the Braves this winter. I know he's going to get that chance to stretch out and maybe start this spring, but I can't help but think the success that he's enjoyed in the bullpen, particularly with the White Sox, is where he fits the best on this Braves pitching staff. But Chris, let me turn the question to you. What role do you think Lopez will end up playing for the Braves?
I mean, I think that's going to be one of the big things to watch in the spring. I'm intrigued to see what he looks like as a starter, but at the same time, he was electric out of the bullpen last year. We saw him a couple of times, I think, with the Angels and the Nationals. Just a huge fastball, 98.2 average. Opponents hit 188 against it. I really like him in that late inning as another guy that could throw late in and middle innings, and possibly give you a couple of them if he stretched out. I think one big thing to watch with him though was the changeup usage. That's just obviously he's a fastball slider guy. the changeup really ticked up in his last stop, I think, in Cleveland. It was really good. Opponents hit only 154 against it. The 123 expected weighted on base. If he's going to be a starter, that changeup's going to be very important. But it's just another weapon that he can use against left-handers, to get them out. So I like him better in relief, but I'm really interested to see where how much of a chance the Braves give him to start.
Yeah, I definitely. I think the curiosity is worth kind of finding out if you're the Braves. But as you look at the trade that happened after the Reynaldo Lopez signing that brought over Chris Sale, that might have changed the dynamics just a little bit. And if you missed our preview of the starting rotation, make sure you check that out right here on the channel. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn on those notifications. You'll never miss an episode of BPTV. But speaking of the White Sox, the Braves made a rather large trade to acquire lefty Aaron Bummer. And you might be thinking, a large trade for Aaron Bummer? Well, it was a quantity trade, most certainly. They packaged up 5 players, including Michael Soroka, Nicky Lopez, Jared Schuster, all to get a guy that they were targeting at the trade deadline last year. Alex Anthopoulos finally made that deal, and Bummer, he may have had a pretty rough line in 2023, but Chris, the Braves clearly believe there's much more to him than his stat line from a year ago.
Yeah, and if you remember a year ago, I mean, at the trade deadline, they were pretty much out of lefty relievers, so it's not surprising that they were chasing Aaron Bummer. Obviously he struggled last year, 6.79 ERA, but he had a 3.58 FIP, 3.53 expected ERA. There was a lot of bad luck involved there. For his career, I thought this jumped out at me. Lefties are hitting just 199 and slugging 258 against him in his career. I can see him playing in that role a little bit. He's shown he can get both righties and lefties out, but at the same time, he's a big weapon out of that bullpen in a tough spot against a left-handed hitter.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than a year ago when the Braves went out and got Lucas Litke, who was someone who dealt with a lot of off speed, cut fastballs, things like that, and was effective against lefties prior to joining the Braves. But then it felt like maybe he just didn't quite have the arsenal. But Bummer, I don't think there's much of a question about his arm. And speaking of which, the Braves also traded for another hard-throwing lefty in Ray Kerr. They got him from the Padres. You might remember the Matt Carpenter era. Well, it didn't last very long, but Ray Kerr, that era could last a bit longer for the Braves. He could be a key piece, I think, as far as depth is concerned. I mean, maybe the ceiling's higher than that, but remember, Atlanta basically, Chris, last year got down to A.J. Minter from the left side for quite a while. They don't want to find themselves in that boat again.
No, and Kerr's a hard thrower from the left side, but he's also got options, which was something that they didn't really have last year.
Yeah.
It was really hard for them to bring up a fresh arm or add a sixth starter when they needed one. Potentially, there's a little more flexibility in this bullpen, and Kerr's a big part of that.
Yeah, most definitely. And speaking of A.J. Minter, he's back again in 2024 after avoiding arbitration with a deal worth just north of $6 million in his final year of club control. There were some ups and downs for him this year, but there's no question how valuable he's been to this bullpen year after year for the Braves. Another 70 appearances for Minter last season that led the Atlanta staff. He did a little bit of closing early on, struggled in that role, but found himself, I think, and a couple of miles an hour on that fastball as the weather started to heat up. Into the season with a 3.76 ERA and 64 and 2/3 innings, nearly 11 and a half strikeouts per 9. 4th straight year, Chris, this jumped off the page to me, with a fielding independent pitching sub-3. So a little bit unlucky at times as A.J. Minter, even if some folks online maybe don't want to believe that. The numbers tell a very different story. But bottom line, the Braves will be expecting A.J. Minter to get some big outs for them again in 2024.
I mean, A.J. Minter's been their best reliever for at least the last 2 or 3 seasons and played a huge part in that World Series run. He's reliable. Like you said, 70 games, appearances. Brian Snitker will put him in a ton of different situations. He's comfortable with him closing. He's comfortable bringing him in the 6th inning. Bases loaded, high leverage. It doesn't matter. You can't say enough good things about A.J. Minter because he just goes out there and does his job.
No, you really can't. And it's been kind of fun, I think, I know for you as well as me and a lot of folks out there that watched AJ come in as a prospect where there was some expectation for him. He came up, he did some closing. He was back in that role again. And maybe that's not the one he excels at. But when the Braves have needed some huge outs and just flat out somebody to hand the ball to at times, especially in the postseason, AJ Minter has answered that call time and time again. Another man who answered the call in the postseason in a big-time way, another lefty at that the Braves would love to have back in their mix is Tyler Matzek. He's expected to be ready to start the season after rehabbing from Tommy John surgery, missing all of 2023. Chris, I think maybe the understatement of the show, Matzek's absence was really felt throughout the course of the year for this Braves bullpen, and maybe just one of those missing pieces that when you get him back could make this group even better than it already is, at least on paper.
Yeah, no, he's another guy that you wanna see in spring training, and like you said, a huge piece of this bullpen. They really missed him last year, especially after Dylan Lee went down with a shoulder injury. Just kind of ran out of lefties. Honestly, it was just Minner down there. The big thing I think for Matzek, you never was really healthy in 2022. The velo was down considerably year over year. Averaged 96 with the fastball in 2021. It was down to 94.1 in 2022. I think it'll be interesting to see where his velocity's at coming off Tommy John surgery. I know the Braves say that he's going to be ready for the start of spring. I expect them to bring him along slow. But if you get that guy back anywhere close to where he was at 2021, that's
Yeah.
just another impact arm, for a bullpen that's pretty loaded without him.
It most definitely is. And looking at what Tyler Matzek meant to the Braves in their 2021 season, I don't know if the lockout of 2022 might have had an adverse effect on a lot of pitchers trying to get ready in a much shorter amount of time, trying to get everything cranked up. That could have been one of those factors that he was dealing with. But talking to Tyler throughout the course of the year, he was around the team. He wanted to do his rehab in Atlanta. He was still very much there, very much present. And in that second half, we started to see him out on the field and throwing. So again, if that throwing program has him ready for the start of spring training, he can get some innings in the Grapefruit League, and then maybe the Braves do bring him along, giving him what would amount to a bit of a rehab assignment before activating him. But that velocity is there. I mean, it's no joke. Tyler Matzek could be one of the biggest weapons for this Braves bullpen without question. You mentioned Dylan Lee. He was also up and down in 2023, thanks in large part to a shoulder issue. He got that cleaned up. The Braves would like to put him back in this mix as well. And this, Chris, I think is the part of the program where we start to see just how much depth the Braves have in this group. Lee was a huge contributor as a rookie in 2022, limited to just 24 appearances last year, only 4 of those coming after mid-May. If he's anything close to what he was in 2022 when he posted a 2.13 ERA and 50 and 2/3 innings with 10.5 strikeouts per 9, then the Braves bullpen, particularly from the left side, just gets that much better.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, at this point, you're starting to see now where they're going to have not just one lefty, but 2, 3, 4 even. Dylan Lee was great. He was earning Brian Snicker's trust. We saw Snicker putting him in some very tough spots before that shoulder injury. It's unfortunate he can't try to come back at the end of the year. Wasn't completely right. He's also got options, and it's another part of this bullpen that can actually add to the flexibility, which is important over a 162 game season.
Yeah, you're going to have that. And there are going to be different guys. I used the word earlier, attrition. Every bullpen, all 30 teams, they go through this over the course of a year. You're going to go through some relievers in today's era of Major League Baseball, more so than I think any era in the history of baseball. Now, this all leaves us with the closer. I wanted to let him close this thing out. Raisel Iglesias did a pretty solid job, I think, in 2023, even though he did have some clunkers, and every closer has those from time to time if you watch all 30 teams. 33 for 37 ultimately in save chances to go with a 2.75 ERA, 11 strikeouts per 9 in his 58 appearances. He gets the job done more times than not, which may sound like a backhanded compliment, Chris, but that's not my intention here. The Braves are in pretty good hands when it comes to closer.
Yeah, I think they wanted that experienced guy down there, and that was one reason they went out and got him. At the trade deadline, even when they had Kenley Jansen in 2022.
Mhm.
I think thinking long term, Iglesias could slide into that closer's role. Again, 33 saves. He missed first month of the season with a shoulder issue. So you thinking what are you could have actually been. So he's solid guy that goes out there all closers are going to have some hiccups here and there. But I mean, overall, I feel pretty comfortable with the lead and Iglesias coming in the ninth.
Yeah, I believe it was 4 blown saves. 2 of those ended up being wins for the Braves, as it was. I know it makes people nervous when they're happening in the mid portion of September, but among the problems that the Braves had when it came to October was not shaky work in the ninth inning. Unfortunately, there were a few more things that really didn't allow this bullpen to flex its muscle as much as it might have liked to. Now, let's mop up this episode with a few arms that could do just that. They could mop things up in the Braves bullpen if needed this year, maybe a little bit more than that. Daysbel Hernandez got an unexpected opportunity last year, at least for me. An injury put a damper on that, but I think he's one of those arms to watch. I'm also curious how Atlanta is going to use Huascar Ynoa, who's going to be ready to return from Tommy John surgery in the spring as well. Chris, is there anybody else you have your eye on? And I guess the million-dollar question, when do you think the Braves are going to call up Jesse Chavez and offer him an invitation to camp?
Look, I saw an Instagram post the other day where Jesse's getting ready. He's
Mhm.
throwing. So I've been waiting on that announcement any day now. I actually, but Daysville Hernandez is somebody I really got my eye on. I know they were really pleased with him, and they had a lot of good things to say. During the bye week in the postseason when he was doing the workouts at
Mhm.
Truist Park, he was one of the more impressive guys, and actually made the division series roster.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
he's a guy to keep an eye on as a righty. Got options, of course, and then again, Jackson Stevens. He played a huge part for this team in 2022. Injuries really limited him last year. He's going to have to earn his way onto the team in spring training. But there's another guy that can go out and throw one inning, and go out and throw 3 innings, and we know how much they like that versatility. So I think he's another guy to keep an eye on in the spring.
Yeah, now here's a story that might be a little bit unconventional, but might as well throw it in under the umbrella of the bullpen because that's where he would get a job if he is to get one. Charlie Culberson, we heard talk of this last year that he was going to do some pitching. He went down to Gwinnett and was able to do just that. Braves are going to bring him to big league camp. He throws 93, 94 miles an hour. So, I mean, the velocity's there. He's no stranger to the game. It's a unique situation for him. It's a long shot, of course, to make the club out of spring training, but when you get into the course of the regular season, if Charlie Culberson's really able to catch lightning in a bottle, we've seen crazier things happen when it comes to the Braves bullpen. But it would be, as I just mentioned, quite a story to see Charlie Culberson's latest comeback get him back on this Braves roster.
Yeah, that would be the story of the season, I think, in a lot of circles. But I can't wait to see him. I can't wait to see him in the spring. We know the velo's there. It's what can he pair with it? I know he was working on a cutter and maybe something else. But again, hats off to him for recognizing the situation and doing everything he can to stay in the game. You've got to love that passion out of a player that has had to battle for a roster spot just about his entire career.
Yeah, I mean, every day you can get in the big leagues, I think, is an important day. And I say that as somebody who would love to have just one day in the major leagues. And I'm sure I'm not alone with a lot of you out there watching as well. And we know how important this bullpen is going to be to the Braves' success in 2024. Let's connect the dots, though. Health is going to play a huge role in determining how all of that goes. But, Chris, this is a strong group behind a pretty solid rotation that will allow for Chris Sale, Charlie Morton, a couple of these guys to maybe not feel like they've got to throw 6, 7, or into the eighth inning. You got a bullpen that can cover multiple frames, and you're going to feel pretty good about whoever walks through when that door swings open.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's deep enough now that you're comfortable pitching anybody in the fifth or sixth inning. You've got enough guys to cover the back end as well. So I think that's really going to help those guys like Charlie Morton and Chris Sale, because they don't have to feel like they have to go out and throw 6, 7 innings every single start. Obviously, they're going to want to give innings, but and then Lopez is kind of the X factor in all that, because if he's stretched out, you could see him come in and give a couple of big innings in the middle frame. So I really like the flexibility. I think it's much more balanced than what we saw last year with the number of left-handed options they have, and then the flexibility to be able to send a few guys up and down and keep fresh arms up with the major league club. I think they're just really set up for success this season.
Yeah, I know the joke that Brian Snitker says, which really isn't a joke. It's just a saying that actually has a lot of truth to it. So maybe we call it a cliche. You're going to need as many or all of these arms at some point over the course of the season. And the Braves are pretty happy to have the quality depth that they have when it comes to this bullpen. That's going to do it for this episode of BPTV. Join us next time. We'll be previewing the Atlanta infield and catchers on the next episode of our 2024 Atlanta Braves preview series. You can, of course, catch our starting rotation preview episode right here on the channel. We appreciate you riding along with us. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And we will catch you next time, Braves Country. Until then, so long.